a peaceful village in Spain, a beautiful American couple chasing their dream of a simple life. But behind the stunning landscapes of Santoalla, a dark feud was brewing, one that would end in betrayal, disappearance, and a chilling discovery years later. What really happened to Martin Verfondern, and how did a neighborly dispute turn deadly? Stay with me as we uncover the twisted story of the Santoalla mystery.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really complex and, well, ultimately tragic story. It's the case of Martin Verfondern and the village of Santoalla in Galicia, Spain. You've shared a really detailed account with us, and our aim today is to unpack the key events, look at the motivations, and maybe explore some of those questions that just hang in the air afterwards.
It's a powerful story, definitely. It really gets into what happens when this dream of an idyllic, simple life runs up against, well, some very deep-seated issues in a very isolated place.
Let's paint that picture first. Santoalla do Monte in the 1990s, it's practically a ghost town by then, right?
Almost.
Yeah.
Just one family left, the Rodriguez-Gonzalez family. You had Manuel and Jovita, the parents, and their two sons, Juan Carlos and Julio.
And it's incredibly remote. We're talking accessible only by an unpaved track, way up in the mountains. That isolation feels key from the very beginning.
Well, absolutely. That kind of geographic isolation, it fosters a real sense of, well, insularity. In these small rural communities, traditions, family roles, they become really entrenched. Outsiders arriving. That can cause ripples, sometimes big ones.
And into this scene come Martin Verfondern and Margot Poole. He's German, a pacifist avoiding military service. She's Dutch. They meet in Amsterdam.
Right, and they have this shared dream. A quiet, ecological farm, maybe a guest house out in the countryside somewhere.
They looked all over Europe, apparently, and then, May 1997, they land in Santoalla. Seems perfect for what they wanted.
It represented that pull towards self-sufficiency, didn't it? Connecting with nature, a slower pace. It's a dream lots of people have. But picking somewhere that remote, it dials up both the potential rewards and, the challenges of fitting in.
So they get started, and those early years sound tough, rebuilding a ruined house literally from the ground up.
Yeah, and Martin had to keep going back to Holland sometimes, just to earn money to pour back into the farm.
Plus, the Galician winters are harsh, and back then, no internet, no easy links to the outside.
Exactly, but they stuck with it. And eventually the farm, the guest house, they started doing well. Margot was pretty savvy using Facebook to get visitors.
And Martin got that Chevrolet Blazer, an old military vehicle,
Right.
Probably essential for the terrain, you think?
Definitely needed something rugged. But yeah, a big American vehicle like that probably stood out.
Maybe a bit of a symbol of their connection outwards. Bringing in guests, getting supplies.
Could be a tangible sign they were establishing themselves. Maybe becoming more visible in a place the Rodriguez family had entirely to themselves for so long.
And the relationship with the Rodriguez family? Initially, it was okay, even good.
Surprisingly so, yeah. Shared meals, the locals teaching them the ropes, have farm there, how to adapt.
Yeah.
That went on for about 13 years.
13 years of coexistence.
Right. Which makes the breakdown, when it came, feel even more dramatic.
What shifted?
Well, the account suggests the Rodriguez family's attitude changed. Maybe driven by envy, resentment, this feeling that these foreigners were benefiting from their land.
And that's when the harassment started. Small things at first.
Seems like it. Letting their cows wander into Martin and Margot's crops, opening the chicken coops so the chickens escaped, stealing butane gas cylinders, stuff like that.
Annoying, disruptive,
Yeah,
deliberately hostile.
exactly. Martin tried talking to them, tried to smooth things over peacefully, but it just didn't work.
Communication breakdown.
Completely. And that failure to resolve things peacefully, that feels like a really critical turning point.
Okay, so things are tense. And then comes what seems like the real catalyst. Early 2009, right? A wind energy company shows up.
Yes. They're interested in putting turbines on a nearby mountain, which happens to be communal land.
Yeah,
And they initially approached Martin.
offering money.
Yeah, about 6,000 euros a year, potentially. But the crucial thing isn't just the wind turbines, it's what this contact reveals.
Which is...
Martin discovers this huge area of communal forest land, nearly 500 hectares of pine forest, rich in timber.
And it wasn't owned by the Rodriguez family privately.
No, that's the key. It was owned collectively by the inhabitants of Santoalla. This comunero system, it's traditional in Galicia.
Like a shared community asset.
Exactly. And this forest, it generated serious money from logging every so often. We're talking maybe 72,000 euros each time.
Wow. And Martin and Margot knew nothing about this.
Nothing. It seems the Rodriguez family had been collecting all the money from the logging rights and just kept quiet about the whole thing. Never mentioned it.
So Martin and Margot are pouring their own savings into the village.
Uh-huh.
While the village itself technically has this significant income stream they should have been part of.
You can imagine how Martin felt. Deceived, exploited. It's completely understandable. He was furious.
I'll bet. So he demands his rights. To be recognized as a comunero.
Yes. He wanted his share, not necessarily just for himself, but to reinvest in Santoalla, improve the village.
And how did that go down with Manuel Rodriguez?
Badly. A major argument, apparently. Unresolved. And that's when Martin and Margot decide, okay, we have to go the legal route.
They're challenging the status quo, aren't they? The family's long-held control over this money and maybe their dominance in the village.
Precisely. And the fact it was Martin, the outsider, doing the challenging, that probably just poured fuel on the fire.
So they went to court.
They did.
Yeah.
And they won, initially. The court agreed Martin should be recognized as a comunero.
You'd think that might settle it, but no.
Quite the opposite. The Rodriguez family were furious, launched an appeal. And that seems to be the absolute point of no return.
And the harassment got worse. Much worse.
Alarmingly so. Poison crops, actual death threats, finding bullet casings left on their doorstep.
Good grief.
Mutilated livestock turned up. There was even physical aggression towards Martin himself. It sounds like a living nightmare.
Just constant fear and intimidation.
The legal win didn't bring peace. It triggered something far more dangerous. The family clearly wasn't going to accept it.
It's terrifying. So Martin, understandably, starts getting really scared for his life.
He did. He started taking precautions. Bought a video camera, started filming incidents, documenting everything.
He's trying to create evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even contacted the media, a journalist, Sylvia Pontevedra, and gave her hard drives packed with his recordings, basically building a file.
And installed security cameras, too.
Yes, trying to get some protection, some proof of what was happening. He knew how serious it was.
He even called it rural terrorism publicly.
He did. He wasn't mincing words. He felt under siege.
And he was particularly scared of Juan Carlos, wasn't he? Even though Manuel made direct threats, why Juan Carlos?
It seems it was because, despite Juan Carlos's intellectual disability, which made him perhaps less predictable, he habitually carried a shotgun. That combination.
Access to a weapon and impaired judgment.
Yeah.
It's chilling.
They created this really volatile, frightening dynamic.
Then the final court ruling comes down, December 4th, 2009.
Right. From sentence. The Rodriguez family must recognize Martin as a comunero, legally binding.
But did it help?
Right.
Or just increase the fear?
It seems the latter. Martin was apparently even more afraid after that definitive ruling. But they couldn't just leave, could they? They'd put everything into Santoalla.
Like a whole life was there.
So Martin makes this heartbreaking decision. He convinces Margot she needs to go to Holland for a while, for safety.
He sends her away.
Yeah. And he went with her on one trip. And while they were there, secretly, he took out a life insurance policy. Margot was the sole beneficiary.
Oh, wow. He really thought something was going to happen to him.
It seems so. A terrible premonition. He clearly felt the danger was imminent and potentially fatal.
And then, January 19th, 2010.
Yes. Martin, he was 52 by then. He leaves the house in the Blazer. They had 6 guests staying at the time. He tells them he's just popping into Peton for groceries, won't be long.
Was that unusual, him going to town?
Apparently, yes. He didn't make those trips very often.
So when he didn't come back?
Concern starts to grow. The guests wait. Hours pass. They're probably hesitant, don't want to interfere.
And eventually,
After 2 whole days, with no sign of Martin, they finally contact Margot in Holland.
and she tells them to call the police immediately.
Straight away. Report him missing to the Guardia Civil. No delay.
So the search begins. Big search.
Very intense. Land, air. Margot rushes back from Holland, obviously frantic.
Did they find any trace of him initially? Where he went?
They confirm he was in Peton that day. Seen in a cyber cafe. Caught on camera shopping at the O Barco supermarket.
Okay, so he made it to town.
Yes, and he visited his mechanic friend, Antonio. Antonio later said Martin seemed really worried, talked about the harassment from the Rodriguez family again.
And crucially, witnesses saw his car heading back toward Santoalla around midday.
That was the key piece. He made it to town, did his errands, and was seen driving back in the direction of home.
So what were the initial theories? Accident.
That was the first thought. Mountainous area, winter snow.
Yeah.
Maybe he crashed. But they searched extensively, found nothing. No sign of the Blazer, no sign of Martin.
What about him just leaving? Voluntary disappearance.
They looked into that too. But there was zero activity. No bank withdrawals, no emails sent, nothing to suggest he'd just walked away.
And Margot? What did she think?
She was adamant from the start. She told the Guardia Civil everything, the conflict, the threats, her certainty the Rodriguez family was involved.
Did the police follow up on that?
They did. They reviewed all of Martin's previous official complaints. They interviewed the Rodriguez family.
Who denied everything, presumably.
Completely denied any involvement. And without any physical evidence, any proof linking them directly to his disappearance.
Well, the police couldn't make any arrests.
So the case just stalled.
Pretty much. It became a mystery. It did get media attention, nationally, internationally even. Peter Artevries, the Dutch investigator, got involved. Jeffrey Gray wrote about it for the New York Times.
But the official search wound down.
Over time, yes. And Margot was left there, living in Santoalla, seeing the Rodriguez family every day, hearing their hints that Martin had just run off and left her.
While she's convinced they killed him, that must have been unbearable, unimaginably difficult. Years of uncertainty, suspicion, isolation.
And this went on for how long?
4.5 years.
4.5 years of not knowing.
Until June 18th, 2014. A complete fluke.
What happened?
A Guardia Civil helicopter was doing a routine fire prevention patrol, flying over the Serratuix Mountains, about 18 kilometers from Santoalla.
So quite a distance away.
Yeah. And they spotted something. An unusual glint of metal down in a remote, heavily forested area.
Don't tell me.
It was Martin's Chevrolet Blazer, partially burned, hidden amongst young pine trees. It was a reforestation area, actually.
Hidden? Deliberately?
Looked that way. It wasn't totally destroyed by the fire. Maybe a fire break nearby helped. Maybe the snow that winter stopped it burning completely. But the license plates were gone, removed.
Okay, so this is clearly foul play. What did they find inside? Or nearby?
Inside, no human remains initially. But they did find Martin's hard drives, the ones with his recordings, and a burned laptop.
The evidence he'd been collecting.
Some of it, yes. Nearby, they found scraps of fabric, maybe his clothes, a mobile phone casing, though Martin had left his actual phone at home, and definite signs of another fire nearby, like someone tried to burn more evidence.
But still no Martin.
Not right away. They brought in a cadaver dog. And about 95 meters from the car, the dog found remains, fragmented, skull pieces, a tibia, some smaller bones. The rest likely taken by animals over the years. But DNA tests confirmed it. It was Martin.
Finally, confirmation, but horrific confirmation.
Absolutely. And the location, so remote, hidden like that, it screamed that whoever did this knew the area very, very well. And they never wanted him found.
So Margot could finally bring him home.
Yes. She was finally able to bury him in Santoalla, next to his favorite tree, just like he'd apparently wished. A measure of closure, at least.
After all that time, so suspicion must have immediately zeroed back in on the Rodriguez family.
Instantly. The motive was clear, that land dispute. The history of threats was documented, and they knew that terrain like the back of their hands.
But proving it was still the issue, right?
Exactly, which led to this pretty remarkable undercover operation.
No. What did they do?
Police agents went in, posing as farmers. They spent time integrating, gaining Juan Carlos's trust.
And did it work?
Apparently, yes. He started talking, boasting a bit about knowing the land, his skill with a gun, and then, spontaneously, he just came out with it. Said something like, "The Dutchman arrived. He was coming like crazy, but I grabbed the shotgun and shot him."
He confessed. Just like that.
To the undercover officers, yes. Now, that kind of confession isn't always straightforward legally.
But it gave them grounds to pull in the brother, Julio?
Precisely. They brought Julio in for formal questioning, and his story was, well, very different.
What did Julio say?
He claimed he found Martin's body in the car, but on January 16th, which is 3 days before Martin actually disappeared.
Yeah.
Already a red flag.
Definitely inconsistent.
Julio said he panicked, figured everyone would blame his family because of the bad blood, so he decided to get rid of the body and the car himself.
On his own.
That's what he claimed. Drove the Blazer way out to a Vega, dumped Martin's body down an embankment, burned the car and belongings, and then, get this, walked the 18 kilometers back home through the mountains.
18 kilometers after doing all that.
Seems unlikely, doesn't it? Especially the walk back, it raised huge doubts. Made the police suspect this was a coordinated story, a cover-up.
So he denied knowing his brother shot Martin.
He claimed he just found the aftermath and reacted out of fear for his family. Denied any knowledge of Juan Carlos's actions beforehand.
So they arrested both of them.
Yes, November 28th, 2014. Both Juan Carlos and Julio were arrested.
What did forensics find on the remains? Anything conclusive?
It was difficult because of the condition, but they confirmed the gunshot was likely from a 12-gauge shotgun, which fits with the weapon Juan Carlos was known to use.
So the police theory was Juan Carlos shot Martin in the car. Julio helped hide the evidence.
That became the working theory. The big question mark was just how involved Julio was. Was it just covering up after the fact, or was he involved before or during?
And Juan Carlos? Did he stick to his confession?
No. During the official investigation, he retracted it, pleaded not guilty. His defense lawyers went hard on his intellectual disability.
Right, the assessment was 65% disability, mental age of about 7.
Correct. The argument was he was incapable of premeditation planning the murder. They argued he was impulsive, easily suggestible, and that confession to the undercover cops was just childish fantasy, basically.
Trying to get the charge reduced from murder?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pushing for something like reckless homicide, maybe committed in the heat of the moment, rather than planned murder.
So what were the final charges?
The prosecution charged Juan Carlos with murder, asking for 17 years. They charged Julio initially just with covering up the crime.
And that's where that Spanish law about family members comes in.
Yes, Article 454 generally exempts close relatives from punishment for covering up a crime committed by another family member.
So Julio might walk free even if found guilty of the cover-up.
Potentially, yes. However, the prosecution kept their options open. They reserved the right to upgrade the charge against Julio to co-author of the murder, seeking 18 years, if the trial evidence suggested he was more deeply involved, that there was some prior agreement.
Interesting legal angle. What about the father, Manuel? Was there any suspicion about his role?
There was speculation. People who knew him, like the journalist Silvia Pontevedra, noted his behavior became very paranoid after the arrests. Suggesting maybe he put Juan Carlos up to it, maybe manipulated him, knowing his disability. But we'll never know for sure.
Why not?
Because both Manuel and his wife Jovita died before the trial started. Their side of the story was never heard in court.
Wow, so key figures gone. The trial finally starts June 18th, 2018. What was the atmosphere like?
Reports say Juan Carlos was very emotional in court. The prosecution focused on showing he was familiar with guns he hunted, trying to counter the childlike defense.
And Margot testified.
Yes, powerfully, about Martin, about their life, their love for Santoalla, and the constant fear and threats they lived under. Must have been incredibly difficult.
And the defense stuck to the lack of premeditation argument.
Yes, pushing for that lesser charge, reckless homicide, heat of passion kind of thing.
So, the verdict, what did the jury decide?
Juan Carlos was convicted of murder. He got 10.5 years in prison, plus ordered to pay 50,000 euros compensation to Margot.
And Julio?
Julio was found guilty of the cover-up, but because of that kinship law, he was acquitted of a prison sentence.
So, no jail time for him, despite helping hide the body and car.
Correct. However, they did impose a restraining order. He couldn't go near Margot or return to Santoalla village for over 11 years.
Acknowledging the need to protect her, at least.
Definitely. It was a complex verdict, balancing the crime, the disability, and that specific family law aspect.
What happened after the trial?
Well, Juan Carlos actually started getting temporary prison leave as early as 2019.
Really? That seems quick.
It does raise eyebrows. Then in 2022, the whole case exploded back into public view with the film Asbestos. Ah yes, The Beasts. Critically acclaimed, loosely based on this story.
Right. And that renewed interest also brought attention back to an earlier documentary from 2016 called Santoalla.
Made by Andrew Becker and Daniel Mayer. And the timing on that was incredible. They actually arrived in the village the very day Martin disappeared.
No way.
Yes. So their film has firsthand accounts, Margot's testimony, and even some of Martin's own recordings. It's incredibly immediate.
Must be haunting to watch. So, Santoalla today, what's it like now?
It's still remote, it's still quiet. But now, Margot Poole is the only person living there.
She stayed after everything.
She stayed. She's continued the ecological farm, kept the animals, works the land. She hosts visitors, often young people wanting to experience rural life.
That's remarkable resilience.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
She said Santoalla is still her paradise. She wants to stay there forever, near Martin's grave.
Wow. It's an incredibly powerful choice. But the legal case is closed yet. Questions remain, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. The biggest one, perhaps, is, could this have been prevented?
Yeah.
If the authorities had intervened earlier, more decisively, when Martin was reporting all those threats?
Given how much he documented, how many complaints he filed, it's a difficult question.
It really highlights the challenge of dealing with escalating conflict in these isolated places. When are threats taken seriously enough? When is the intervention effective?
So wrapping up this deep dive, the Santoalla story is just brutal, isn't it? A dream shattered by conflict, hostility left unchecked. It's a really compelling but deeply sad account you shared.
It really digs into those tensions, doesn't it? Rural isolation, culture clashes, the allure of escape versus the reality of entrenched local dynamics, envy, and the tragic cost when warnings aren't heeded.
Yeah, it touches on so much, the good and bad of close-knit communities, the responsibility of authorities.
And maybe the limits of individual attempts at peace when faced with determined hostility.
It makes you think about how we handle conflict, especially in places that feel off the map.
Definitely. Are the systems robust enough to protect people even in the most remote corners?
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on. Knowing how it ended and knowing Martin tried so hard to sound the alarm, where was the point? Was there a point where intervention could have changed things? And what wider lesson does this hold? About taking seemingly local disputes seriously with real diligence? Is there a broader responsibility we're missing sometimes?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? Could diligence and attention have rewritten this incredibly tragic ending? Something to really consider.
A lot to process indeed. Thank you for guiding us through this very difficult story.